The Lost City Beneath the Sahara. Secrets of the Eye of Africa. The Sahara today is a kingdom of silence, a vast ocean of sand stretching beyond the horizon, swallowing all that dares to resist it. But once, long before time carved its mark upon the dunes, this desert was not barren. It was green, alive, and filled with the echoes of a world now erased. Hidden deep within this golden sea lies a colossal enigma, a perfect eye carved into the earth, so vast it can only be truly seen from the heavens. The Richat Structure, known to many as the Eye of Africa, stares back at the sky, a riddle written across 25 miles of stone, rings, and ruin. To some, it is nothing more than geology, an eroded dome, a quirk of nature. To others, it is the very heart of legend. But 2,000 years ago, Plato told a story of a magnificent city, Atlantis, built in perfect concentric circles of land and sea, ruled by a powerful empire until catastrophe consumed it in a single night of fire and flood. For centuries, scholars, explorers, and dreamers have searched oceans and mountains for its remains. Yet what if Atlantis was never beneath the sea, but beneath the sands? The Eye of Africa matches Plato's vision in eerie detail. The size, the shape, the circular rings, even traces of ancient waterways flowing from its center. Could this be coincidence, or has history hidden a truth so explosive it would rewrite everything we know of civilization as dawn? As satellites trace its colossal outline and as whispers of ancient cataclysms grow louder, a chilling possibility emerges. Atlantis may not be myth at all. It may lie here in the beating heart of the Sahara, watching us with its unblinking gaze. Tonight, we journey into the desert. We follow the forgotten rivers, the vanished cities, and the unbroken silence of time. And we ask the question that haunts humanity still: was the Eye of Africa once the throne of the greatest empire the world has ever forgotten? This is not just the story of lost stones. It is the story of a civilization buried beneath sand and secrecy, of gods and kings erased, of knowledge lost to the ages. The Sahara will keep its secrets no longer. Chapter 1. The Sahara that was once green. To picture the Sahara as it is today is to imagine the end of life, a vast kingdom of shifting dunes, scorching winds, and endless horizons of silence. To cross it is to feel the weight of eternity pressing down on human bones. But roll back the clock, not by decades, not by centuries, but by millennia. The scene changes so profoundly it defies belief. The desert's skin peels away to reveal rivers winding like veins of silver. Vast lakes glitter under a merciless sun, yet they bring life, not death. Plains of tall grasses sway in the wind, punctuated by acacia trees and lush wetlands. Herds of wildebeest, antelope, and gazelle stampede across the savanna, while elephants wander in procession toward fertile riverbanks. Crocodiles and hippos bask lazily in waters that stretch for miles, their ripples echoing in the warm dusk. This is not the Sahara we know. This is the Sahara reborn, a living, breathing Eden carved into the heart of Africa. Scientists now call it the African humid period, spanning from around 10,000 to 5,000 years ago. During this time, monsoon rains shifted northward, flooding the desert with life. The evidence is overwhelming. Fossilized fish bones lie buried beneath dunes, where no drop of water has fallen for thousands of years. Ancient riverbeds snake across the Sahara like phantom scars visible from satellites orbiting hundreds of miles above. Lake sediments whisper of bodies of water so vast they dwarfed modern European lakes. Lake Megachod, for instance, once spread across an area the size of Germany. Rock art adorns cliffs and caves, depicting hippos, giraffes, buffalo, and lush grasslands teeming with life. In this paradise, humans thrived. At Tassili Naja in Algeria, cave walls unfold like vast libraries of forgotten memory. Painted across stone are scenes of cattle herders guiding their flocks, hunters with bows chasing game, and families gathered in rituals beneath star-filled skies. Some figures defy explanation, towering beings with elongated heads, strange attire, and almost otherworldly presence. Were these gods shamans in ceremonial dress? Or could they represent memories of beings no longer of this earth? For thousands of years, the Sahara was no desert wasteland. It was one of humanity's great theaters. Kingdoms could have risen here, their cities built upon riverbanks now swallowed by sand. Trade could have flourished between the Nile, the Mediterranean, and lands further south. Perhaps even a mighty empire spread its influence across these fertile plains, its legends echoing down the corridors of time until Plato recorded them as the tale of Atlantis. But paradise is fragile. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the skies began to shift. The rains retreated. The rivers grew thin, the lakes shrank, grasslands turned brittle, animals migrated, desperate for water, crops failed, and people began to scatter. What once fed multitudes could no longer sustain even the few. Within a few millennia heartbeat in geological time, the Sahara transformed from lush paradise to the desolation we see today. This was not just a drought. It was apocalypse. To the peoples who lived it, it must have felt like the wrath of gods, a punishment from heaven. Oral traditions likely carried memories of a great land that drowned in sand and despair. Could this transformation be the root of the story of Atlantis? Plato described a world destroyed in a single night of catastrophe, but myths exaggerate what they remember. What if a night was, in fact, centuries of relentless desertification? What if Atlantis is not beneath the ocean, but beneath the Sahara's sands? Archaeological discoveries deepen the mystery. In Chad, ancient megalithic stones stand aligned with celestial patterns, as if forgotten astronomers once measured the heavens. In Mauritania and Niger, remnants of settlements cling to the edges of vanished rivers, suggesting a once flourishing people. And in the very heart of this land lies the eye of Africa, its perfect concentric rings echoing Plato's every word, To truly grasp the mystery, imagine yourself standing on a high plateau 10,000 years ago. Below you stretches a vast plain where water glitters under the afternoon sun.
In the distance, a circular city gleams, its walls carved in rings of stone and water.
Ships sail along canals that radiate outward, bringing trade from faraway lands. The air hums with voices, with drums, with prayers offered to gods of earth and sky. This was no barren wasteland. This was civilization itself thriving, luminous, powerful, yet all things fall. As the desert tightened its grip, that golden age withered. Temples crumbled, cities drowned not in water, but in sand, and the memory of a once great world faded. What remains today is silence. Silence, and the eye that stares unblinking at the heavens. The Sahara buries its secrets well. But every fossil, every painting, every grain of sand tells the same story. This desert was once alive, and if it once lived, if it once nurtured peoples whose memory still haunts our myths, then perhaps its heart, the Eye of Africa, is not just a geological curiosity. Perhaps it is the tomb of a civilization the world has long sought, but never found. The Sahara was once green. It was once fertile. And in its transformation lies the possibility that it holds the greatest secret of them all. For where there was water, there was life. And where there was life, there may have been an empire whose brilliance still blinds us across the centuries. The question now is not whether the Sahara could sustain life. It is this: what great city thrived at its heart? The answer awaits in the eye of the desert. Chapter 2. The Eye Revealed. Discovery of the Richat Structure. For centuries, travelers crossed the Sahara with little more than stars and instinct to guide them. Caravans of camels carried salt, gold, and ivory across the shifting seas of sand. To them, the desert was a prison without end, a world of monotony where each dune resembled the next, and only the horizon broke the emptiness. Few who braved its heart returned with tales of wonder. The Sahara swallowed its secrets whole. Yet lying there, all along an unblinking sentinel in the center of Mauritania, was a structure so immense that no human walking the desert floor could perceive its form. To those who passed nearby, it may have appeared only as low ridges of rock, circles half buried by drifting dunes. But from the heavens, its true face is revealed. The Richat Structure, the Eye of Africa. Discovery from the heavens. It was not ancient kings, not desert nomads, not even European explorers who first grasped the eye. It's a vast design. It was the astronauts. In the early years of space exploration, when mankind first gazed upon Earth from above, the Sahara revealed its secret to the void. Against the blank expanse of sand stretched a colossal eye, a near-perfect series of concentric rings carved into stone, spanning nearly 25 miles across. To those orbiting above, it appeared unmistakably an iris gazing back into the cosmos, outlined with ridges, shadows, and light. Its circular pattern made it a natural landmark for astronauts navigating the barren sea below. Over time, it became one of the most recognizable geological features on the planet, though its meaning remained obscured. From space, the Earth often looks chaotic. Mountains crumpled by tectonic force, rivers carving jagged scars, coastlines torn by erosion. But the eye is different. It is symmetrical, ordered, precise. Its rings spiral outward, like ripples frozen in time, as if the Earth itself had been struck by some unfathomable force. Geological explanations and their limits. Scientists have long sought to explain the Eye of Africa. Some propose it as a geological dome, created when ancient rock layers bulged upward through tectonic pressure, only to erode over millions of years into circular ridges. Others argue it could be the remains of a giant asteroid impact, its force carving rings into the Earth like a cosmic scar, but no evidence of such an impact has been found. No melted rock telltale shocked quartz, Instead, the prevailing theory calls it a symmetrical uplift, a geologic bubble, that weathering sculpted into perfect circles. Yet even this leaves questions unanswered. Why is this symmetry so exact? Why does it align eerily with Plato's description of Atlantis, a city of concentric circles of land and water? And how is it that this feature, buried deep in the desert, corresponds so precisely in size and design to an ancient tale passed down through Greek philosophers? Skeptics dismiss these comparisons as coincidence. To them, the eye is nothing more than geology and erosion. But to a third, it is far more wound in the earth, where a civilization once thrived, erased not by time alone, but by cataclysm. Legends in stone. The Richat Structure is not merely a geological curiosity. It is surrounded by whispers of history, by traces of human presence that refuse to be ignored. Archaeological surveys in its surrounding plains have uncovered stone tools, arrowheads, and remnants of ancient settlements. These artifacts suggest that people lived and thrived in the shadow of the eye during the African humid period, when water and greenery transformed to the soil. Satellite imagery has revealed what appear to be the faint outlines of ancient river channels radiating outward from the eye. If true, they echo Plato's words with unnerving precision. Canals and waterways flowing from the central rings into the open plain. Could these waterways have once nurtured fields and supported ships? Could the eye itself have been the heart of a great city? Nomadic legends speak of forgotten cities beneath the sands, swallowed when the desert turned hostile. Oral traditions across Africa carry echoes of mighty empires that fell overnight, of gods who punished mankind with fire and drought. Could such memories, passed from generation to generation, have traveled northward until Greek philosophers wove them into the tale of Atlantis? Plato's Atlantis and the eye. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato described Atlantis as a city built in concentric circles of land and sea. The central island was ringed by alternating water and land, connected by bridges and channels, with a grand palace and temples to the gods at its core. The city was said to measure roughly 23 kilometers across. The Eye of Africa measures nearly the same. Coincidence or clue? Plato claimed that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar. For centuries, this led explorers to search the Atlantic Ocean, diving into waters near Spain, Portugal, and the Caribbean. But what if beyond did not mean across the ocean? What if it meant deeper into Africa itself, past the known world of the Mediterranean, into the continent's interior, where rivers once flowed into fertile lands? The Sahara would have been a place of wonder to the Greeks, as mysterious as the ocean itself. Its green plains may have seemed a paradise beyond the known world, fitting perfectly the description of Atlantis. And when that paradise vanished under desert sands, memory transformed it into myth. The eye is an ancient city. Stand at the edge of the eye today, and the landscape feels alien. Vast ridges curve around you, forming circular walls that rise and fall like waves of stone. Within the innermost ring lies a plateau, flat, open, and vast enough to hold temples, palaces, and fields. From above, its symmetry is undeniable. Imagine it not as barren rock, but alive. Picture water filling the rings, boats gliding across canals, marketplaces bustling with traders from distant lands. Picture walls gleaming with painted stone, towers rising against the horizon, fires burning at night to honor gods whose names are lost. The eye is not just geology. It is a blueprint. Some theorists argue that the rigid structure is not natural at all, but the ruin of a man-made city eroded by time. Others suggest it may have been partly natural, adapted by a civilization that built walls, channels, and structures into its design. Whether natural or crafted, the eye remains hauntingly aligned with Plato's story, a landmark hidden in plain sight. For centuries, no one saw it. No one could. Its sheer size makes it invisible to those who stand within it. A single traveler at its edge would see only hills and valleys. To perceive its true form requires altitude mountains, or better yet, the heavens. That is why it remained a secret until the modern age. Only when satellites and astronauts gazed down did its full symmetry emerge. This in itself raises questions. If the eye was once a city, who designed it to such colossal proportions that only gods or beings from the sky could have admired its full perfection. Was it meant to be seen from above? Ancient myths across the world speak of gods descending from the heavens, teaching mankind knowledge, then vanishing. Could the Eye of Africa be a monument not just to human civilization, but to something greater, something that watched over Earth from the skies? Skepticism and suppression. Mainstream archaeology dismisses these ideas. To them, the eye is geology, nothing more. Atlantis is myth, a parable about hubris and morality, not a real place. Yet history holds countless examples of truths dismissed as legend until proven otherwise. Troy was once a myth, until Heinrich Schliemann unearthed it. The jungles of Cambodia were thought incapable of hiding cities, until LiDAR revealed Angkor-e a vast expanse. How many other myths still wait beneath the sands, ridiculed until the day they are undeniable? The Richat Structure challenges the narrative. If it is indeed Atlantis, or even the ruins of some forgotten civilization, it would force us to rethink everything. The timeline of human history, the origins of culture, the scale of ancient knowledge. Perhaps that is why the idea unsettles so many. The eye as the gateway. The Eye of Africa is more than stone. It is a gateway between what we know and what we dare to imagine. To skeptics, it is coincidence. To believers, it is revelation. To those who stand in its shadow, it is something else entirely, a haunting silence that whispers of forgotten worlds. And if it truly was Atlantis, then it is not just a ruin. It is a tomb of kings, of gods, of knowledge erased by Catholicism. As we gaze into the eye, we see not just geology, not just myth, but a mirror of ourselves, our hunger for knowledge, our fear of the unknown, and our longing for a past that may have been greater than our present. The eye has been revealed. Its form is undeniable. Its mystery remains, but the story does not end here. For if the eye once held Atlantis, then it must also hold the memory of its fall. The question is no longer what the eye is, it is why it died. And so we march deeper into the heart of Catholicism, into the moment when paradise became desert and empire became dust. Chapter 3. Atlantis, according to Plato. Myth or memory. 2,000 years before satellites revealed the Eye of Africa, a philosopher sat in Athens, penning a dialogue that would ignite one of history's greatest mysteries. His name was Plato. His words, woven into Timaeus and Critias, have haunted scholars, dreamers, and explorers for centuries. He spoke of an island empire greater than any known in his age, a civilization unmatched in power, wealth, and knowledge. He called it Atlantis. For some, it was parable, a warning of hubris, arrogance, and divine punishment. For others, it was testimony, a memory carried from the deep past, preserved in story until philosophy gave it voice. But what if Atlantis was not myth at all? What if Plato was not inventing, but recording? And what is the blueprint he preserved is still visible, carved into the heart of the Sahara Desert, the dialogues, words that echo through time. In Timaeus, Plato introduces the tale. His character, Critias, recounts a story told by Solon, the great Athenian lawgiver, who in turn heard it from Egyptian priests during his travels to Egypt. The priests spoke of a powerful empire that ruled the seas and lands beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar. This empire, they said, had once threatened Greece. Itself, Atlantis, according to Plato, was a vast island nation, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. Its fleets sailed far and wide, conquering lands and enslaving peoples until they turned their gaze upon Athens. There, the tale claimed, the Athenians resisted, defeating the mighty Atlantean host. Soon after, divine judgment fell. In a single day and night of catastrophe, Atlantis sank beneath the waves, swallowed by the sea, lost forever. In Critias, Plato becomes more precise. He describes Atlantis itself, a city laid out in concentric rings of land and water, a central island containing temples to Poseidon and Clito, the first rulers of the land. Bridges and canals connecting each ring to the sea, a diameter of roughly 23 kilometers across. Rich resources, metals like orichalcum, fertile soil, and abundant timber, a population mighty in war and wise in knowledge. These details are not vague allegory. They are measurements, architecture, geography. They describe a city so clear in form that one could almost build it again. Plato the philosopher, Plato the recorder. Skeptics argue that Plato invented Atlantis as allegory. To them, it was not history, but morality tale, a warning of arrogance punished by gods. But why, then, was Plato so precise? Why did he include measurements, locations, and names? Why did he cite Solon and the Egyptian priests as sources, instead of presenting it as his own invention? Plato was many things, but he was not careless. His works laid the foundation of Western philosophy. To dismiss Atlantis as mere fable ignores the possibility that Plato was preserving a tradition older than Greece itself, a memory of a catastrophe so great that it reshaped human civilization. If Plato was reporting memory, not myth, then we must ask, where was Atlantis, the eye and the echo? Plato wrote that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules. For centuries, explorers searched the Atlantic Ocean, the Azores, the Canary Islands, the Caribbean, but none matched his detailed description. None mirrored the concentric rings, the canals, the KOOL, until the Eye of Africa, its diameter, nearly identical to Plato's measure, its rings, perfectly concentric, alternating land and potential waterways, its central plateau, a flat island suitable for temples and palaces, its location, beyond the pillars, in lands known to Egyptians, yet mysterious to Greeks. Even the rivers once flowing from the eye resembled Plato's canals. To dismiss the similarity as coincidence strains belief. The eye is not only plausible, it is almost exact. Mythos, memory. Cultures across the world preserve tales of floods, cataclysms, and vanished lands. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the story of Noah's Ark, from Hindu texts of Manu flood to Native American legends of drowned continents, humanity remembers a world destroyed. Could Plato's Atlantis be another echo of this universal memory? And could the Sahara, with its vanished rivers and drowned plains, be the stage? When the African humid period ended, civilizations that thrived upon its lakes and fields would have faced devastation. To those who endured, the collapse must have felt like divine wrath. A paradise turned to ash. Such a fall could seed the memory of Atlantis. A civilization erased. Plato wrote of Atlantis as advanced. They forged metals unknown to others. They commanded fleets of ships. They built monumental architecture. They ruled with kings descended from gods. Skeptics claim such a civilization could not exist so early. Yet archaeological discoveries challenge this. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dating to 12,000 years ago, displays monumental architecture when humans were thought to be mere. The builders of Pumabunku in Bolivia carved stones with such precision that modern engineers struggle to replicate them. The Indus Valley civilization crafted vast cities with plumbing and urban planning thousands of years before Rome. If such wonders existed, why not a Saharan empire now buried by sand? Why not Atlantis in Africa? The silence of academia. Why is this possibility dismissed? Because it threatens the timeline. Mainstream archaeology insists that complex civilization began only around 5,000 years ago, in Mesopotamia and Egypt. But if Atlantis existed, and if it lay in the Sahara, then civilization is far older, far broader, and far more advanced than we admit. The eye becomes more than geology. It becomes evidence. Evidence that humanity's story is not linear, but cyclical. Empires rise, empires fall, and their memory becomes myth until rediscovered. To admit Atlantis and the Sahara is to admit that our history is incomplete. Plato's prophecy. Plato warned that Atlantis fell because of hubris, because its kings became corrupt, its people greedy, its empire arrogant. The gods, he said, punished them, drowning their city in fire and flood. But perhaps the truth is simpler. Perhaps nature, not gods, brought Atlantis down. Climate shift, desertification, or cosmic impact forces beyond human control. Yet Plato's warning still rings true. Civilizations, no matter how mighty, can vanish overnight. Atlantis, whether myth or memory, stands as a reminder. We are not eternal. We are fragile against the earth's wrath. The eye as Atlantis reborn. Stand at the center of the eye, and imagine Plato's words taking form. Rings of water glistening in the sun, towers rising against a blue sky, ships crowding canals, temples of white, red, and black stone shining upon the central island. It is not fantasy, it is description. A description written 2,000 years ago, yet echoing perfectly in a desert, feature unseen until the space age. Coincidence or confirmation? Myth or memory? Plato may have been philosopher, but in the tale of Atlantis, he was also historian. His words may preserve not a fable, but a memory. A memory of a world that thrived, of a civilization erased, of a city swallowed not by ocean but by desert. Atlantis may not lie beneath the waves of the Atlantic. It may lie beneath the sands of the Sahara, and the eye of Africa may be its tombstone, staring forever skyward as witness. Wind howls, sand swirls like waves. If so, then Atlantis is not myth, it is memory. A memory written in stone, preserved in legend, and waiting in silence for us to see. And so we turn from Plato's words to the stones themselves. For if Atlantis was real, its ruin must bear witness, and the eye must tell the tale of its fall. Chapter 4. The Circular City, Architecture of the Gods. In Plato's account, Atlantis was no ordinary city. It was designed with intention, symmetry, and laid out in circles of land and water, as if following a cosmic blueprint. At its center rose temples and palaces, surrounded by walls of gleaming metal and stone. It was, he said, a city built by gods for men. And in that design was power, order, and mystery. When we gaze upon the eye of Africa today, we see barren ridges of rock spiraling outward, weathered by time. Yet strip away the sand, fill the circles with water, and suddenly Plato's city reemerges. The parallels are uncanny. The scale, the symmetry, the central island. Could the eye once have been Atlantis itself? Could these circles have formed the stage where gods and kings walked together? The blueprint in stone. Plato describes 3 rings of sea and 2 of land, encircling a central island. The whole city spanned about 23 kilometers across. At the very core lay a sacred temple to Poseidon, walls sheathed in precious metals, a palace for kings, and a spring of fresh water. The outer rings contained gardens, markets, and harbors. Bridges connected the rings, while canals radiated outward to the plain beyond. Now look to the Richat Structure. Concentric rings of stone, distinct, wide enough to support walls, structures, or waterways, a central plateau rising at the heart. Flattened road, the perfect site for a palace or temple, a diameter nearly identical to Plato's measurement, evidence of ancient rivers and channels once flowing outward, as though they were the canals he described. Coincidence alone cannot account for the symmetry. The Richat Structure mirrors Plato's vision with such precision that to dismiss it as mere erosion is to ignore the echo of design, sacred geometry, and divine proportion. Ancient peoples across the world built according to sacred geometry. The Egyptians aligned pyramids to the stars. The Mayans carved temples that echoed the cycles of Venus. Stonehenge marked the solstices with perfect precision. To them, architecture was not simply functional. It was spiritual. It linked heaven and earth. The concentric design of Atlantis, if real, was no accident. Circles represent eternity, divinity, and cosmic order. To build a city in circles was to mimic the heavens, to live within a reflection of the god's perfection. The eye of Africa, with its colossal rings, embodies this principle on a scale unmatched anywhere else on earth. Could it be that the builders of Atlantis, whether human or divine, chose this site precisely because nature had already provided the canvas. Perhaps the Richat's natural rings were enhanced, sculpted, and engineered into the fabled city Plato described, the central island. Plato spoke of a central island housing temples to Poseidon, adorned with gold and orichalcum, a metal more precious than anything except gold. Within stood a great statue of the god himself, riding a chariot of winged horses. At the ice core lies a plateau, elevated above the outer rings. Geological surveys reveal evidence of springs and underground water channels in this region. A striking parallel to Plato is mention of a freshwater spring within the sacred island. Imagine, thousands of years ago, priests drawing water for rituals, kings bathing in basins of stone, offerings placed before a towering idol. Today the plateau is empty, silent, scarred by erosion, but in its silence we hear echoes. Echoes of a sanctum where men once worshipped gods, walls of metal, temples of stone. According to Plato, Atlantis shone with metals, the outer walls sheathed in bronze, the inner in tin, and the sacred walls of the temple flashing with auric. He described temples larger than any in Greece, adorned with ivory, precious stones, and gold. At Richat, we see no metal walls. Erosion has stripped the earth bare, yet Mauritania and its surrounding lands are rich in minerals, copper, iron, gold, and more. Ancient miners could have drawn from these veins, adorning their city in gleaming splendor. Imagine, under a blazing Sahara sun, walls that glittered like fire, a city that could be seen for miles, a jewel set in the crown of Africa, the great plain beyond. Plato described a vast plain stretching outside the city, rectangular in shape, crisscrossed with canals for irrigation, the rigid structures surrounded by broad flatlands. Now barren, but once fertile, ancient riverbeds, detected by satellites, radiate outward from the eye. The land around it could easily have supported crops, herds, and cities that fed the Atlantic capital. Imagine ships sailing the canals, fields rippling with wheat and barley, orchards heavy with fruit. This was no isolated kingdom. It was an empire, its reach stretching across land and sea, supplied by a fertile heartland that now lies parched beneath sand. Atlantean engineering. If the eye was Atlantis, then its builders were master engineers. To carve canals, build bridges, and raise walls of such scale required knowledge long thought impossible for ancient peoples. Yet, time and again, archaeology proves that the ancients were capable of wonders. Consider the pyramids of Giza, the aqueducts of Rome, the megaliths of Baalbek. Consider the Harappan drainage systems in the Indus Valley, or the precise astronomical alignments. Civilizations thousands of years old achieved feats. We'd still marvel at Atlantis. Ephraim may have surpassed them all, and if the eye was their capital, then these rings once echoed with the sounds of hammers, chants of priests, cries of merchants, and the thunder of armies mustering for war. Architecture for the gods. Why concentric rings? Because they were not just practical. They were divine. To live in such a city was to walk through a symbol of eternity. Each ring represented not only a wall of defense, but a circle of existence. The mortal realm, the divine, the cosmic. Plato's words suggest Atlantis was as much a temple as it was a city. Its architecture was worship. Its stones sang with meaning. The Eye of Africa, colossal and symmetrical, embodies this truth. Even stripped of its walls and waters, it radiates order, as if designed not by chance but by purpose, the ruins in silence. Today, nothing remains of temples or walls. The eye is bare, eroded a scar of stone and sand. Skeptics point to this as proof. There are no ruins, no columns, no inscriptions, yet time is merciless. In Tasada's shifting dunes swallow monuments. In storms, sand grinds stone into dust. Entire cities can vanish in centuries. And Atlantis is said to have fallen millennia ago. If wood and metal once built its houses, they are long gone. If its walls were quarried, they may now lie buried beneath dunes or ground into gravel. But the shape, the blueprint, remains. A city's skeleton still etched into earth. The circular city lives on. Stand at the eye's edge, and it is easy to imagine. The rings filled with water, bridges spanning each canal, towers reflecting sunlight, priests climbing steps to sacred altars, ships laden with goods sailing outward toward distant colonies. This is not barren wasteland. It is memory, a memory written in stone. It is said by tie-in, but never destroyed. If the Richat Structure is indeed Atlantis, then its architecture was not simply human. It was cosmic. It mirrored the heavens, honored the gods, and reflected eternity itself. And though the city is fallen, its design lives on, echoing in every stone circle, every temple, every myth of sacred geometry across the world. The circular city was not only a home for kings. It was a mirror of the divine, foreshadow of a fall. But perfection breeds arrogance. Power begets corruption, as Plato wrote. The kings of Atlantis grew proud, greedy, and cruel. The gods, once honored, were forgotten. And when reverence dies, so too does protection. A circular city, magnificent in its design, could not shield its people from what was to come. Whether flood, fire, or sand, catastrophe would fall, and the architecture of gods would crumble into ruin. The eye remains, but its city is gone. What destroyed it? How did paradise become desert? That is the story of the next chapter. When we step into the cataclysm that turned green plains into wasteland, and perhaps Atlantis into myth. Chapter 5. Lost Rivers and Vanished Seas. It is hard to imagine now, standing amid the burning silence of the Sahara, that this land was once alive with water. Yet beneath the sands lie ghostly scars, riverbeds etched into stone, deltas buried by dunes, lakes long evaporated. From above, satellites trace them like veins of a body that no longer breathes. They stretch outward from the eye of Africa, flowing toward horizons where seas once glittered. To understand the eye is to understand its waters. For Plato did not describe a city of dust, but of canals, harbors, and fertile plains nourished by rivers. If the Richat Structure is Atlantis, then it must have been fed by the lifeblood of streams and seas, and the Sahara, long before its death, was indeed a kingdom of rivers, rivers beneath the sand. Modern technology has unveiled what the naked eye cannot see. Using radar and satellite imagery, scientists have discovered vast networks of fossil rivers hidden beneath the sea. Once, they stretched hundreds of miles, carrying water from the highlands to great inland lakes and out toward the Atlantic. The Tamandaraset river system, now buried, was once among the largest rivers on Earth. At its peak, it rivaled the Nile, carving a valley that emptied into the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Mauritania. Its channels pass near the eye, suggesting that the Richat may once have been connected to the sea. Smaller tributaries crisscross the land, feeding wetlands and plains that could support crops, livestock, and entire civilizations. Beneath the dunes of Libya, Niger, and Chad lie the sediments of lakes so vast they covered entire regions. Lake Magajed, at its maximum, spread over 400,000 square kilometers, dwarfing modern Lake Victoria. In this web of water, the eye could have stood as both fortress and harbor, its concentric rings filled with rivers and canals. Ships could sail from its heart to distant seas, bringing wealth and power to the Atlantean Empire, Plato's canals, and the Sahara's channels. Plato's description of Atlantis is astonishing in its precision. He speaks of canals, dug by Atlanteans, to connect the central rings to the outer sea. He mentions waterways wide enough for ships, with bridges spanning them, and fertile plains irrigated by channels. Now compare this to what we find in the Sahara. Ancient channels radiating outward from the eye, visible from above, etched deep into stone, evidence of erosion and flow, suggesting that water once coursed through them, not in trickles, but in torrents. Satellite scans revealing alluvial fans where rivers once emptied into plains, perfect for farming and settlement. The match is uncanny. What Plato described as canals, we now see as rivers. What he called harbors, we we can imagine as lakes or inlets, one surrounding the eye. If these waters truly flowed, then the Richat was not isolated in desert, but the beating heart of a vast aquatic network, the plain of Atlantis, and the Sahara's fertility. Beyond the rings, Plato described a plain stretching for hundreds of miles, rectangular in shape, flat and fertile, irrigated by straight canals. To skeptics, this seemed fanciful, yet the land surrounding the eye is indeed a broad, flat expanse, extending outward like a natural stage. During the African humid period, this plain would have been fertile, fed by rivers from the eye and rains from monsoons. Crops could grow in abundance. Herds could graze. The Atlanteans, if they lived here, would have commanded a breadbasket capable of feeding armies and sustaining empire. Imagine wheat swaying under the desert sun, orchards heavy with fruit, canals cutting lines across the land, glinting in the light. From Ti, water would flow outward like blood from a heart, nourishing the body of a civilization, the vanished seas. Plato spoke of Atlantis as an island power, a naval empire whose fleets reached far shores. For this to be true of the eye, it must once have touched the sea. Evidence suggests it may have. The Tamanrasset River, as it carved westward, opened into a vast submarine canyon off the coast of Mauritania. This canyon could only have been formed by a colossal river pouring into the Atlantic. If the eye was connected to this river system, then its waters may once have carried ships to the ocean. Even if the eye itself was not an island, the rivers and lakes around it could have created a maritime hub, a place where ships sailed from inland seas to the outer ocean. In this sense, Atlantis need not have been an island in the strictest sense, but a watery kingdom whose rivers gave it naval power. The Sahara, green and fertile, could sustain such a dream. Water as sacred power. Across ancient cultures, water was life. It was also divine. The Nile sustained Egypt and was worshipped as a god. The Tigris and Euphrates shaped Mesopotamia and its myths. Rivers were not merely resources. They were symbols of creation, destruction, and renewal. In Atlantis, Plato wrote, the central island contained both a freshwater spring and a hot spring, gifts of the gods themselves. The ice core, too, has evidence of underground water and springs. Imagine pilgrims walking to its center to draw sacred waters, believing them to be the breath of Poseidon or another god. Imagine ceremonies on the banks of canals, offerings cast into rivers, prayers rising with the mist. The waterways of Atlantis were more than practical. Tiwete Holy, the Eye of Africa, once laced with rivers, could have been both city and sanctuary, its lifeblood flowing outward in sacred streams, the silence after the waters. The waters fragile. When the monsoons shifted and the rains retreated, the rivers dried. The Tamanrasset dwindled. The lakes shrank, and the fertile plains became barren. Where once ships sailed, only sand remained. Where once crops grew, only dust scattered in the wind. For the people who lived here, this was catastrophe beyond comprehension. Their rivers, their gods, had abandoned them. Their fields withered. Their cities crumbled. Memory turned disaster into myth. A land drowned not in water, but in absence of it. Kingdom destroyed not by flood, but by thirst. Perhaps this is the origin of Plato's tale of Atlantis sinking into the sea. For what is the loss of rivers, if not drowning in reverse? A civilization can die of thirst as surely as it can of flood. To those who survived, the end would have felt apocalyptic, worthy of divine punishment, the echo of forgotten waters. Today, the Sahara's rivers flow only in silence. Their channels remain, etched in stone and sand, but no water passes through them. Yet in their ghostly patterns, we see Atlantis. We see canals that once carried ships. We see plains once irrigated. We see seas that no longer exist. The eye is a city of memory. Its rings were once filled with water. Its channels once reached distant seas. Its plain once rippled with life. To stand upon its ridges now is to stand upon a tomb. The tomb not just of a city, but of a world drowned in silence. And so the question deepens. If the eye once lived, If its rivers once flowed, who built upon its banks? Who thrived in this watery paradise? And what legacy did they leave before the desert swallowed their memory? The answer lies in the people themselves, the rulers, priests, and warriors who may have called Atlantis home. And in the next chapter, we turn to them. Chapter 6. Artifacts and Theories. Was there a civilization here? If the Eye of Africa was once Atlantis, then its ruins must have left behind a trace. A lost empire cannot vanish without a footprint. The sands may bury its walls. The sun may bleach its monuments. But the earth remembers. And so we must ask, what evidence remains? What artifacts? What fragments? What whispers and stones suggest that men once lived and built upon the Richat Structure? The story of Atlantis is not merely one of circles and canals. It is one of people. Kings, priests, warriors, artisans. If they lived here, their legacy would not vanish entirely. And indeed, scattered across the Sahara relics that hint at civilizations erased from memory. Stone tools beneath the eye. The Richat Structure itself bears no standing temples or engraved columns. Yet archaeologists who walked its ridges have found stone tools, arrowheads, scrapers, axes, fragments of flint chipped by human hands. These are not random shards, but deliberate artifacts, tools of survival, hunting, and perhaps ritual. Some date back tens of thousands of years, belonging to Paleolithic and Neolithic peoples. Others are more recent, remnants of pastoralists who thrived during the African humid period. Alone, they may seem unremarkable, but together, they reveal something vital. Humans were here. They lived in the shadow of the eye, drew water from its springs, and left behind evidence of their presence. To skeptics, these tools prove only nomads passed through. To believers, they are the faint fingerprints of Atlanteans, the survivors of a forgotten empire. Rock art, memories on stone walls. Across the Sahara, in caves and cliffs, art tells the story the sands conceal. At Tassili Najar, in the heart of the desert, vast galleries of paintings stretch across stone. Here we see hunters chasing gazelle, cattle herders guiding flocks, dancers raising arms toward gods. But there are stranger images too. Beings with elongated heads, round helmets, or radiating halos. Figures that seem neither fully human nor entirely earthly. Some archaeologists dismiss these as stylized humans or shamans in ritual garb. Others suggest they depict visitors, gods, spirits, or perhaps even beings from beyond. Whatever their nature, they reveal a people with culture, ritual, and memory. They show a Sahara not empty, but alive with meaning. Could these figures be Atlanteans remembered? Could the art be the last echo of a civilization that thrived near the eye? If so, they are not just drawings. They are testimony, myths of forgotten empires. The Sahara is not silent in story. Across Africa, oral traditions whisper of lands that flourished and fell. West African griots sing of kingdoms swallowed by sand. Berber legends tell of cities cursed by gods, buried in a single night. Egyptian priests, speaking to Solon, recounted a tale of Atlantis, an empire older than Greece, wiped away by catastrophe. Even beyond Africa, the myths converge. The Dogon people of Mali speak of knowledge brought by beings from Sirius, knowledge of stars invisible to the naked eye. The Yoruba tell of gods who descended on chains of light. The Fulani recount stories of ancestors driven from lands overtaken by desert. These fragments may be mythology, or they may be memories. Memories of a lost age, when water nourished the Sahara, when kingdoms ruled from its heart, and when catastrophe silenced them. Fossil seas and ancient harbors. If Atlantis was maritime, its people must have built harbors. At the eye, no stone docks remain. But around its rings, satellite imagery reveals patterns in the soil, alignments that resemble channels or keys now buried. Some researchers propose these could be remnants of harbors carved into natural waterways, long since dried. Nearby, fossil fish bones have been found, evidence of lakes and rivers where today only dunes remain. If fish swam here, so too could ships. The eye's concentric rings could easily have formed natural harbors, where vessels docked, markets bustled, and fleets sailed outward. Could the absence of harbors today be proof of their destruction, erased by sandstorms and erosion? Or could they remain buried, waiting beneath layers of silence? The theories of Atlantis add the eye. In recent decades, theorists have turned their gaze to the Richat Structure. Writers, explorers, and independent researchers argue it is the strongest candidate for Atlantis ever found. Their reasons are compelling. Its size matches Plato's description. Its rings echo the city's design. Its central plateau aligns with the temple island. Ancient rivers suggest canals and maritime power. Artifacts nearby prove human habitation. Some propose the eye was not built by man, but chosen by him, a natural formation, enhanced and engineered into a metropolis. Others argue it was entirely artificial, a city carved by forgotten technology. A few suggest an even more radical view, that it was designed by beings beyond this world. Mainstream science resists these ideas, branding them speculation. Yet history has shown that speculation often leads to revelation. Troy, once myth, is now fact. Angkor, once legend, now uncovered. Why not Atlantis? The enigma of orichalcum. Plato spoke of a metal called orichalcum, said to gleam with fiery luster, second only to gold in value. For centuries, it was thought myth, yet in 2015, divers of Sicily discovered ingots of a mysterious copper-zinc alloy, identified as ore. If the Atlanteans mined such metals, where might they have done so? Mauritania, the land of the eye, is rich in copper, iron, and gold. Could Atlantean miners have drawn from these veins, forging orichalcum to adorn their temples? If so, then somewhere beneath the Sahara may still lie the furnaces of a forgotten empire. The silence of proof. Critics argue, if Atlantis lived at the eye, where are the ruins? Where are the inscriptions, the statues, the walls? But time is merciless. Sand devours stone, winds grind it to dust, and shifting dunes bury cities whole. Entire metropolises have vanished in centuries, let alone millennia. The Sahara does not preserve well. Its storms strip surfaces bare. Its dunes migrate endlessly. Its heat fractures stone. If Atlantis stood here, its bones may lie meters below, hidden until technology unearths them. Just as LiDAR unveiled Angkor in the Cambodian jungle, perhaps one day ground-penetrating radar will reveal Atlantis beneath the desert's skin. Memory in the sand. Artifacts, rock art, myths, minerals, rivers. The evidence is circumstantial, yet it weaves a pattern. Alone, each piece proves little. Together, they whisper of a civilization that once thrived, where today only silence reigns. Was the eye of Africa Atlantis? Were its rings filled with ships, its temples gleaming with gold, its people writing myths that still haunt us? Or was it merely one of many forgotten civilizations, lost to time, erased by desertification, remembered only in story? Whatever the truth, the artifacts remind us. People lived here, people thrived here, and perhaps, just perhaps, people ruled here. Kings and queens of a city the world has long sought but never found. The eye is not just stone, it is testimony. And as we press deeper into its silence, we approach the moment when silence was born. The cataclysm that ended it all. Chapter 7. The fall of a great empire. Fire, flood, and sand. Every empire believes itself eternal. Every city imagines its walls unbreakable, its gods unshakable, its glory untouchable. Atlantis, if it stood at the eye of Africa, was no different. Its temples gleamed in sunlight, its rings filled with ships, its plains fed armies and priests. From the central island, kings ruled with authority they claimed descended from the gods themselves. But no city is immortal. No empire escapes the hand of catastrophe. And in the story of Atlantis, that hand fell swiftly, brutally, mercilessly, the wrath of nature. Plato wrote that in a single day and night of misfortune, Atlantis sank. Scholars have long debated what this meant. Was it flood, fire, earthquake, or all combined? At the eye, we see signs of many furies. First came climate collapse. The rains retreated, the rivers thinned, the fertile plains began to dry. A slow death at first. Crops wilting, wells sinking deeper, herds straying farther for water. But then came chaos. Droughts that starved fields, dust storms that choked the air, hunger that gnawed at the people. For a civilization built on abundance, scarcity was a death sentence. Then came earthquakes. The rifted structure lies upon ancient fault lines, scars where the earth once shifted. Tremors shook walls, toppled towers, cracked canals. To the Atlanteans, these were not mere quakes. They were omens, gods tearing the ground beneath their feet. And perhaps, most terrifying of all, came floods. As lakes dried in some places, sudden torrential storms lashed others. Flash floods swept through valleys, washing fields into rivers. Ancient channels, once lifelines, became torrents of destruction. Some theorists even suggest a cosmic strike, an asteroid or comet fragment that could have ignited firestorms and tidal waves across North Africa. Whether Earth is the fury or sky, the result was the same. Devastation, the collapse of power. An empire thrives when its people believe. When rivers flow, temples rise, and kings command victory, belief endures. But when the rivers die, when the gods seem silent, when famine grips the land, belief falters at the eye. The Atlanteans may have watched their world unravel. Merchants who once filled markets with spices and metals found their trade collapse. Soldiers who once guarded bridges and canals marched only to defend starving villages. Priests who once promised protection from Poseidon faced worshippers who saw nothing but silence in return. And when belief in God fades, belief in kings falters too. Rebellion brews. Rivalries sharpen. A city already trembling from nature's wrath turned upon itself. The very rings that once united its people became walls of division. Civil war may have burned through Atlantis, even as storms lashed from above, fire from the sky. Some theories claim Atlantis was struck by fire from the heavens. Scientists studying ancient craters across North Africa have found signs of impacts. Meteors that shattered land in millennia past. Glassy fragments of desert sand, fused at unimaginable heat, tell of explosions that rival nuclear fire. If one such strike occurred near the eye, its shockwave would have obliterated cities, boiled lakes, and filled skies with ash. Plato's words, "In a single day and night of misfortune," echo the suddenness of such destruction. A people who believed themselves invincible could vanish in hours, their temples reduced to rubble, their fleets to cinders, their plains to wastelands, floods and sandstorms. If fire did not destroy them, water may have torrential rains. Sudden floods, or the bursting of ancient lakes, could have drowned canals and plains. The Thamondresset River, swollen with storms, may have surged with fury, sweeping away villages in its path. A city built upon water was betrayed by water, and when the waters retreated, the sands came. Desertification is no slow creep when pushed by storms. Dunes advance like armies, burying fields, swallowing roads, erasing memory. What once was green turned brown, then gold, then nothing. Within generations, the eye may have transformed from lush capital to barren ruin. The last night of Atlantis. Picture it. The sky, blackened by storm, thunder cracks like celestial war drums, fires burn across the rings, reflected in floodwaters that rise where markets once stood. People flee across bridges that crumble beneath them. Priests chant in desperation, offering sacrifice to gods who do not answer. Kings rally soldiers, but against storm and quake, no spear can hold. The outer rings drown first. Ships, once masters of the sea, are tossed like leaves upon floodwaters. The canals, arteries of empire, become graves. The central island holds longest, its temples lit by lightning, statues casting shadows upon terrified crowds. But as the night deepens, even it falls. Towers crack, palaces collapse. The temple of Poseidon sinks into mud and fire. By dawn, nothing remains. The eye is silent, its people gone, its walls erased, its memory buried beneath waves of sand. Survivors and the birth of myth. No catastrophe spares all. Some must have survived. Refugees fleeing north to the Mediterranean, east to the Nile, south into Africa's forests. They carried memories, fragments of language, whispers of gods, and tales of the great city lost. Over generations, those tales blurred into myths. Egyptian priests told Solon of a civilization drowned. Greek philosophers preserved the memory in dialogue. Across the seas, other cultures spoke of floods, fires, and land swallowed whole. Survivors became wanderers. Wonders became storytellers. Storytellers became myth. Perhaps this is why flood myths echo everywhere. They are not fiction. They are memory. The memory of Atlantis, of the eye, of the night when the gods abandoned their people in fire, flood, and then claimed the rest, the tomb of silence. Today, the eye stares upward, unblinking. Its rings are barren, its canals gone, its plains lifeless. But in its silence lies memory. The ridges that once rang with hammers now echo only with wind. The plateau that once held temples now holds nothing but dust. Yet in their form, they preserve the story of what was. A city magnificent. A city divine destroyed. Was it hubris punished by gods? Was it climate collapse, earthquake, impact? Or was it all striking together in a symphony of catastrophe? Whatever the truth, the effect was absolute. An empire erased. A legend born. Echoes across time. Atlantis may not have sunk beneath the sea. It may have drowned in sand. Burned in fire, shattered by quake, starved by drought. Its fall may not have been sudden waves, but the fury of earth itself. But to those who lived it, it was apocalypse. To their children, it was story. To their descendants, it was myth. And to us, it is question, a question that stares upward through the eye. How fragile are we? How eternal are our empires? How quickly can the ground shift? The sky burn, the rivers vanish. The eye answers with silence, and the unblinking stare of a civilization lost. Chapter 8. The Black Pharaohs and Forgotten Dynasties Nearby. The story of Atlantis, if rooted in the eye of Africa, does not exist in isolation. Civilizations do not rise alone. Empires echo across landscapes, shaping and being shaped by neighbors. To understand the Richat's mystery, we must look outward, to the Nile, to Nubia, two forgotten kingdoms of Sahara and Africa. There, in dynasties often overshadowed by Egypt, lie clues that may bind Atlantis to Africa's ancient legacy, Nubia. The kingdoms of the south of Egypt, along the great Nile, lay Nubia, a land of gold, warriors, and kings. For centuries, Nubia was Egypt's rival, trading partner, and sometimes conqueror. Its people built cities at Kerma, Napata, and Meru, each filled with palaces, temples, and pyramids that still rise from the desert today. The Nubians were not imitators of Egypt. They were innovators. Their pyramids, smaller and steeper, dotted the sands of Sudan, in numbers surpassing even Giza. Their kings mastered iron, ruled trade across Africa, and commanded armies that struck fear into pharaohs. This was no peripheral culture. It was an empire in its own right. From Nubia came the Black Pharaohs. In the 8th century BCE, Nubian kings of the 25th dynasty marched north, conquering Egypt and uniting the Nile under their rule. They restored temples, revived traditions, and declared themselves heirs of the gods. For nearly a century, Africa's southern dynasty ruled one of history's greatest civilizations. Could the memory of Nubia, wheat-eat, dark-skinned pharaohs, and golden wealth have mingled with tales of Atlantis? Could Plato's account of a mighty African power reflect echoes of kingdoms like this? Rulers erased or minimized in history, yet remembered in myth, forgotten kingdoms of the Sahara. The Sahara today seems empty, but in its green age it hosted civilizations as complex as those along the Nile. Archaeology reveals stone structures, megaliths, and settlements buried beneath sand. Some date back thousands of years before Egypt's first pyramids. In Chad and Niger, ancient stone circles aligned with stars, suggesting astronomers tracked the heavens long before recorded calendars. In Mali, Remnants of early urban centers hinted cultures that thrived in trade, agriculture, and ritual. These were not scattered tribes. They were kingdoms. Imagine caravans linking these Saharan powers to the eye, carrying goods, ideas, and myths. If Atlantis stood at Richat, it would not have been isolated. It would have been part of a network, a hub in Africa's golden web of cultures, Ethiopia, and the kingdom of Aksum. Farther east, across the highlands of Ethiopia, rose the kingdom of Aksum. By the 1st century CE, it commanded trade routes between Africa, Arabia, and India. Its kings minted coins of gold, built obelisks that still stand, and carved churches into solid rock. Aksum's rulers claimed descent from Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, linking Africa to biblical and legendary lineages. Though later than Atlantis, Aksum proves Africa's capacity for empire was not confined to Egypt. Across the continent, kingdoms flourished, building monuments, writing languages, and commanding global trade. If such power thrived in Aksum, Nubia, and Mali, why not earlier, at the Eye of Africa, Mali, and the wealth of kings? Centuries after Atlantis's supposed fall, West Africa would again astonish the world. The Mali Empire, under rulers like Mansa Musa, became synonymous with wealth and grandeur. In the 14th century, Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca carried so much gold that it destabilized economies along his route. Timbuktu, Mali's jewel, became a center of learning, where libraries brimmed with manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Though far later, Mali's legacy hints at deep African traditions of empire, scholarship, and wealth. Perhaps Atlantis is remembered in such echoes. Golden kings, vast cities, rivers binding empires. The Sahara, once fertile, could easily have nurtured a predecessor to Mali's greatness, the erased narratives. Why do we know so little of these kingdoms compared to Greece or Rome? The answer is erasure. Colonial powers and Eurocentric historians long dismissed African empires, minimizing their grandeur. Egypt itself was often depicted as an outlier, separated from African identity. Yet the truth is clear. Africa birthed civilizations that rivaled and sometimes surpassed those of the Mediterranean. The Black Pharaohs were rulers of Egypt itself. Nubia's pyramids still rise. Mali's scholars wrote thousands of manuscripts still hidden in desert libraries. Aksum's coins still gleam in museums. Yet in global memory, these dynasties are whispers, their stories buried, just like Atlantis. Could it be that Atlantis, too, was silenced? Its African roots deliberately erased, its memory transformed into a European myth stripped of origin. The idea, for if true, then Atlantis is not just lost beneath sand. It is lost beneath history's prejudice. Parallels with Atlantis. When we compare these dynasties to Plato's Atlantis, parallels emerge. Nubia's Black Pharaohs echo rulers who commanded empires and reshaped Egypt. Saharan stone circles and megaliths mirror Atlantis's supposed advanced architecture. Mali's golden wealth resonates with tales of Atlantean abundance. Aksum's international trade recalls Atlantis's naval power and colonies. Atlantis, then, may not be a single city alone, but the memory of Africa's ancient greatness, condensed into legend, projected onto the eye, preserved by Plato. The eye, as the forgotten pharaoh's throne. If the eye was Atlantis, who ruled there? Were they kings like Nubian pharaohs, black monarchs with crowns of gold, commanding armies and priests? Were they astronomers, aligning canals and temples with the stars? Were they merchants, sending ships down rivers to the sea? Perhaps they were all of these. The could have been a throne of forgotten dynasties, a seat of rulers whose names are now dust. Their power erased by cataclysm may linger in myth as gods who punished or guided mankind. The Black Pharaohs remind us. Africa has always been capable of empire. Atlantis, Ephraim, was no exception. The continuity of legacy. Civilizations rise, fall, and leave traces in the next. Nubian kings became pharaohs of Egypt. Aksum claimed Sheba's throne. Mali inherited traditions of trade and wealth. Could Atlantis be the earliest link in this chain? A mother empire whose fall seeded future dynasties. Survivors of the Eye may have fled east to the Nile, carrying knowledge that shaped Egypt. Others may have moved south, founding traditions that would later flower into Mali. Atlantis may not be missing. It may be hidden within Africa's continuity, its memory alive in every pyramid, every manuscript, every story, sung by griots beneath desert stars. A question of identity. Atlantis has long been imagined as European or Mediterranean, detached from Africa. But what if it was African all along? What if the Eye was its capital, ruled by kings whose skin was dark as Nubia's, whose wealth rivaled Mali's, whose temples anticipated Egypt? What if Atlantis is not lost, but ignored? Because to admit it would mean admitting Africa as cradle not only of humanity, but of civilization itself. Toward revelation, the Black Pharaohs remind us that history is fragile, often rewritten by those who inherit it. The Eye reminds us that geography holds secrets waiting to be unearthed. Together, they whisper of a truth larger than myth, that Africa, long before Greece or Rome, may have birthed the greatest of empires, remembered only as Atlantis. And if that empire fell, if its kings were buried beneath sand, then the next question is inevitable. Why was their story erased, and by whom? The answer may lie not in Africa alone, but in echoes from other mysteries of the ancient world. From South America to Turkey, from Bolivia to Mesopotamia. For when we compare their ruins, a strange unity emerges, and in the next chapter, we follow that unity to other impossible structures that, like the Eye, defy explanation. Chapter 9. Alien or human genius, Puma Punku Gagli Tepe. And the Richat puzzle across the world, ruins stand as riddles, stones carved with impossible precision, temples raised long before agriculture, cities laid out with geometry so advanced that modern engineers struggle to explain them. Each is a puzzle, fragments of a story suggesting that ancient humanity was not primitive, but profound. The Eye of Africa belongs to this same category of mystery. Its concentric rings mirror myth. Its size defies coincidence. Its context unsettles archaeology. But the Richat structure is not alone when compared to other inexplicable sites. Puma Punku in Bolivia, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and countless others. It joins a chorus of enigmas whispering that history as we know it is incomplete. Puma Punku, the stones of the gods. High in the Andes of Bolivia lies Puma Punku, part of the ancient city of Tijuana. At first glance, it appears as rubble, massive blocks scattered across a windswept plateau. But look closer, and the mystery deepens. The stones, some weighing over 100 tons, are carved with angles, grooves, and drill holes so precise that they fit together like machine parts. H-blocks with perfectly straight edges locked together with no mortars. Surfaces are flat to microscopic accuracy. Holes are drilled in perfect alignment, as if by modern tools. Yet, Puma Punku is estimated to be over 1,500 years old. And some claim its origins stretch back even farther into prehistory. How could people with no wheel, no metal tools, and no advanced machinery carve stone with such perfection? Mainstream archaeology offers limited explanations. Copper chisels, stone hammers, patience, but skeptics ask, why does even modern technology struggle to replicate these cuts? Was there knowledge we have forgotten, or help from beyond? The parallel to the Eye is striking. Both sites seem almost too perfect, too aligned with math. If Puma Punku suggests lost technology, could the Eye's concentric design suggest the same? Was Atlantis not merely legend, but a civilization with tools we cannot yet imagine? Hey, Göbekli Tepe, and the first template, far across the ocean, in the hills of southeastern Turkey, lies Göbekli Tepe, a site so ancient it rewrote history itself. Discovered in the 1990s, it consists of massive stone circles, pillars carved with animals, symbols, and humanoid forms. Each weighs tons. Some are 18 feet tall. They were erected around 12,000 years ago. centuries before the invention of writing, agriculture, or the wheel. For decades, archaeology insisted that hunter-gatherers of that era could not build monumental architecture. Yet Göbekli Tepe proves otherwise. Not only did they build, but they built with symbolic complexity, suggesting ritual, myth, and cosmology. The site appears to have been deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, preserved in silence for millennia. If Göbekli Tepe existed so early, what other cities might have? Could Atlantis have been one of them? A contemporary, destroyed and buried while Göbekli slept beneath soil. If hunter-gatherers could carve temples, why could others not build concentric cities? Göbekli Tepe shows that human civilization is far older and stranger than textbooks admit, and the Ila Göbekli could be proof that what we call prehistory may hide advanced cultures erased by time. The Richat puzzle in global context. The Richat Structure stands apart in size. While Puma Punku dazzles with precision and Göbekli Tepe shocks with age, the eye astonishes with scale. A formation 25 miles across, mirroring Plato's Atlantis in every dimension. No known ancient city compares. If it was natural, then it is coincidence of staggering proportion. If it was cultural, then it is the greatest ruin ever lost. Placed alongside Puma Punku and Göbekli, the ice seems part of a pattern. Advanced design beyond expected technology. Concentric or geometric layouts suggesting cosmology. Sudden abandonment or destruction. Burial in silence until rediscovered in modern times. This pattern suggests more than chance. It suggests a global memory. Civilizations across continents building according to principles now forgotten, then vanishing in cataclysm. Alien or human genius? Whenever ruins defy explanation, the question arises. Were they built by humans or by something else? Ancient astronaut theorists argued that beings from other worlds guided early humanity, teaching stonework, astronomy, and sacred geometry. Puma Punku's precision, Göbekli Tepe's age, and the eye's design all seem to echo this possibility. Imagine gods descending from the sky, pointing to the Richat, and declaring, "Here shall your city rise." Imagine knowledge shared, tools provided, temples aligned with stars no mortal eye could measure. Is this why so many myths speak of gods walking among men, of sky beings, teaching laws, agriculture, and crafts? Skeptics dismiss this as fantasy. They argue that human ingenuity, persistence, and forgotten methods explain the wonders. They point to experiments showing how stone can be cut with primitive tools, how massive blocks can be moved with levers and ramps. To them, aliens are unnecessary. Humanity alone, with determination, created these marvels. But the truth may lie between. Human genius is undeniable. But what if ancient humans possessed knowledge, now lost? What if civilizations, before the last ice age, mastered techniques erased by flood, quake, and desertification? In this view, Atlantis was not alien, but advanced. A human empire whose brilliance seems impossible only because we have forgotten it. The echo of sacred geometry. From Stonehenge to the pyramids, from two-angle what? Sacred geometry shapes human monuments. Circles, triangles, alignments with solstices. Symbols written in stone to mirror heaven upon earth. The eye of Africa fits this tradition perfectly. Its rings a cosmic mandala, a temple the size of a city. Puma Punku's blocks, Göbekli deep circles, and Richat's rings all suggest that ancient peoples sought to embody universal patterns, whether learned from gods, aliens, or their own genius. The effect is the same. Monuments that speak of eternity, harmony, and power, the unity of mystery. When viewed separately, these sites are puzzles. Together, they form a pattern that defies coincidence. Across continents, cultures separated by oceans, and millennia produce structures that challenge our assumptions. Was there a forgotten golden age? A global civilization erased by cataclysm, whose survivors seeded myths on every shore? Atlantis, if real, may not have been alone. It may have been one jewel in a crown of ancient empires, connected by trade, myth, or shared knowledge. Bumapunku. Hey, bakery tepi. Enrich it. Maybe remnants of a world we barely remember. A world destroyed, leaving only fragments. Suppression cannot last forever. Just as Troy was unearthed, just as Angkor was revealed, so too will Atlantis one day be proven or denied. The eye stares upward, patient, unblinking, waiting for truth to break through silence. And when it does, everything changes. History will no longer be a line beginning in Mesopotamia. It will be a cycle, rising and falling. Atlantis as its first great peak. Africa will reclaim its legacy. Humanity will confront its fragility. And myths will become history. The eye is not just erosion. It is an erasure. Once revealed, becomes revelation. And so, the story sharpens. The suppression ends here. We march into the climax. The revelation of the eye is Atlantis itself. The synthesis of myth, science, and silence. Chapter 11. The Eye of Africa as Atlantis. For millennia, humanity has hunted a ghost, a city whispered by Plato, dismissed by skeptics, longed for by dreamers. Atlantis, a name that stirs oceans of imagination. Was it myth, memory, or truth too dangerous to admit? Now, in the silence of Mauritania, the eye of Africa stares skyward. Its rings spiral like frozen waves. Its plateau rises like a forgotten altar. Its scars whisper like wounds of apocalypse. Here, at last, the scattered fragments converge. Here, the puzzle pieces lock into place. The eye is Atlantis, and the evidence, geological, mythological, cultural, and symbolic, thunders like revelation. Plato's blueprint etched in stone. Plato's words describe concentric rings of land and sea, a city measuring approximately 23 kilometers, with a central island crowned by temples. The Richat structure is nearly identical in scale and form. Concentric rings carved into earth itself, wide enough for canals, harbors, and walls. A central plateau, perfectly suited for palaces and sanctuaries. Ancient river channels radiating outward, resembling the canals Plato recorded. A plain beyond, flat embossed, fit for agriculture and empire. Coincidence strains credibility. How could Plato invent a design mirrored so precisely in a land unknown to Greeks, unless he preserved a memory passed down from survivors, their story reaching Egypt, then Solon, then Athens? The eye is not just similar. It is exact. The Sahara's lost rivers as Atlantis's canals. Plato's Atlantis thrived on water. Canals crisscrossing plains, bridges spanning rings, harbors filled with fleets. Skeptics scoffed. Where, they asked, was such a water-bound city? The Sahara provided its answer. Satellite imagery reveals fossil rivers beneath the sands. The Thamanrasset River once flowed from the Sahara to the Atlantic, a torrent rivaling the Nile. Its channels pass near the eye, suggesting maritime connection. Within the Ritchie itself, traces of erosion mark where water once flowed between rings. Atlantis was not a fantasy of seas. It was a kingdom of rivers, rivers that dried when the Sahara withered. Its canals did not vanish into myth. They hardened into stone, awaiting rediscovery. Cataclysm as memory. Plato wrote of Atlantis's destruction in a single day and night of misfortune. Scholars scoff. How can cities die overnight? Yet geology tells us they can. Earthquakes topple in moments. Volcanoes bury towns in hours. Floods drown valleys in days. Climate collapse, accelerated by drought and storm, can transform paradise into wasteland within generations. The Sahara's shift from green to desert was one of history's greatest cataclysms. Its rivers shrank, its lakes evaporated, its plains cracked. To those who lived it, it was apocalypse. A single day may be metaphor. A memory of sudden collapse condensed into myth, and in that collapse, an empire drowned, not beneath ocean waves, but beneath silence and sand. The eye is the wound of that collapse, staring upward like the pupil of Earth itself, echoes across civilizations. Atlantis was not alone in memory. Flood myths echo worldwide. Mesopotamia's Gilgamesh, the Bible's Noah, India's Manu, Mesoamerica's drowned lands. Cultures separated by oceans tell the same story. A world destroyed, a people scattered, a memory preserved. Could it be coincidence? Or could it be collective memory? Survivors of Atlantis carrying tales to new lands, Egyptians, Nubians, Mayans, Sumerians, all preserving fragments of the same apocalypse. And across Africa, oral traditions whisper of cities swallowed by sand, empires erased overnight, gods who punished mankind with drought and flood. The eye embodies those whispers, the physical anchor for myth. Human genius, or divine gift, the Richat Structure's perfection raises the question. Was it shaped by man, or merely adopted by him? Perhaps nature sculpted the rings, and Atlantis's builders enhanced them, carving canals, erecting walls, building palaces upon natural foundations. Or perhaps they chose the site precisely because it reflected sacred geometry, a mirror of heaven on earth. To their descendants, such mastery seemed divine. Plato spoke of kings descended from Poseidon. Africans spoke of gods descending from stars. Two ancient eyes. Knowledge itself was godhood. So were the Atlanteans gods, aliens, or advanced humans. Perhaps they were all three humans so advanced, their work seemed supernatural, their legacy immortalized as myth, suppression, and silence. Why does mainstream history deny this? Because it threatens narrative. If Atlantis thrived in Africa 10,000 years ago, then civilization did not begin in Mesopotamia. It began earlier, broader, deeper. It began in a land erased by time and prejudice. To admit the eye as Atlantis is to admit history's incompleteness, to admit Africa's primacy, to admit that myths preserve truth, and so silence prevails. The Richat Structure is labeled geology, its artifacts ignored, its rivers dismissed, but truth cannot be erased forever. The eye stares upward, unblinking, daring us to see the emotional weight of revelation. Imagine standing at the eye's center, the desert wind screaming around you, the horizon stretching endless. The rings curve outward, massive, solemn, silent, yet in that silence, imagination resurrects. Ships docking at canals, priests chanting in temples, kings ruling from golden thrones. You realize you are not standing in wasteland, you are standing in a tomb of an empire greater than Egypt, older than Mesopotamia, erased by Catholicism. Buried in May. The weight is unbearable. The desert is no longer empty. Edie's haunted. Every grain of sand is an echo of lives lived, prayers offered, dreams shattered. You are standing on Atlantis itself, the proof in unity. Plato's description matches the ith form. The Sahara's fossil rivers match Atlantis's canals. The African humid period explains its fertility. Catholicism explains its destruction. Oral traditions across Africa and beyond echo its full. Myths worldwide preserve its memory. Each alone could be dismissed. Together, they roar as revelation. Coincidence is too weak. Suppression is too fragile. The eye of Africa is Atlantis. Why it matters today. Why does this matter? Because Atlantis is not only past, it is warning. Plato wrote that Atlantis fell through hubris, arrogance, and greed. Its kings, once noble, became corrupt. Its people, once just, became cruel. And when virtue died, the gods abandoned them. Sound familiar. We live in an age of arrogance, of empires that believe themselves eternal, of technologies that tempt us toward hubris, of climate change threatening catastrophe. Atlantis is not only memory, it is mirror. The eye stares at us, unblinking, asking, will we too fall? Will we too drown in our pride, burned by our excess, buried by our own desert? Atlantis is not gone. It is prophecy. The Eye of Africa is not accident. It is design. It is not erosion. It is memory. It is not myth. It is Atlantis. For too long, we dismissed it. For too long, we buried it beneath skepticism and silence. But its rings do not lie. Its rivers do not vanish. Its silence does not forgive. The eye watches. The why remembers. Atlantis was real. It lived. It thrived. It fell. And it waits here in Mauritania for us to finally acknowledge its truth. The eye is not closed. It is open. Forever open, watching us, warning us, waiting for us to see. The journey has carried us across millennia, from the green Sahara where rivers once sang, to the mighty Eye of Africa where an empire may have thrived, to the cataclysms that erased it from memory. We have traced Plato's words across continents, compared myths across cultures, and listened to the silence of stone. And at last, we have seen what so many feared to admit, that Atlantis may not lie beneath the ocean, but beneath the sands. The Richat Structure is not merely geology. It is testimony. Its rings preserve the memory of canals and harbors. Its plateau echoes with the absence of temples. Its scars bear witness Catholicism. The Eye of Africa is the unblinking pupil of history itself, gazing upward, reminding us of greatness lost and lessons unheeded. Atlantis is no longer myth. It is mirror, a reminder that civilizations rise, flourish, and fall, that hubris, corruption, and forgetfulness invite ruin. Even the mightiest empires can be erased in a single generation, and that we, in our modern age, must listen to the warnings of the past. As the sands shift and the winds whisper, the eye watches. It waits for us to learn, to remember, to understand. The story of Atlantis is not finished. It lives on in us, in our choices, in the fragile line between survival and oblivion. Soft swell of strings, hopeful tones rising. And so the legend closes, not as fantasy, but as prophecy. The Eye of Africa is more than stone. It is a question staring into eternity. Will we too be forgotten, or will we remember? This is KOOL Legends, History, Stories World, where myths breathe, history whispers, and stories ignite the imagination. If this journey moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because the past is never truly gone. It waits for us to uncover it. The question that remains: so, was Atlantis built by aliens or by humans far more advanced than we believe? The evidence speaks both ways. The myths speak of gods descending, but the artifacts show human hands carving stone. Perhaps the distinction is false. Perhaps to the ancients, advanced humans seemed divine, their knowledge indistinguishable from magic. Perhaps aliens are less beings from stars than survivors of an earlier age, passing knowledge before vanishing again. The Eye of Africa, Puma Punku, and Gagakli Tepe all tell us the same truth. We do not know our own past, and until we admit this, the puzzle remains unsolved. The Richat Structure is not alone. It belongs to a family of enigmas, each demanding the same question: what have we forgotten? In the next chapter, we turn to another dimension of forgetting, the deliberate suppression of history. For if Atlantis lay at the eye, why has the world denied it? Who benefits from keeping the truth buried beneath sand and skepticism? Chapter 10. Suppression of history. Why Atlantis threatens modern narratives. History is not simply discovered. It is curated, written by victors, edited by empires, preserved or destroyed according to power. What we know of the past is not the totality of truth. It is the version allowed to survive. And if Atlantis lay in Africa, if the eye was its throne, then the silence surrounding it is no accident. It is the result of deliberate forgetting. Why does Atlantis threaten? Why would scholars, governments, and institutions prefer it remain myth rather than memory? The answer lies in control, for if the eye proves Plato correct, then our timeline collapses, our notions of progress unravel, and humanity's story must be rewritten from its foundations. The gatekeepers of history. Universities, museums, and governments act as the gatekeepers of human memory. Their frameworks shape what we are taught. Civilization began in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley around 5,000 years ago. Before that, humanity wandered as tribes of hunters, but discoveries like Göbekli Tepe, minus 12,000 years old, already shattered this model. Atlantis, proven real, would annihilate it entirely. Imagine a city more advanced than Mesopotamia, yet thousands of years older. Imagine an empire commanding fleets, engineering canals, and ruling with kings descended from gods, all long before the dawn of civilization. Such a revelation would not merely add a chapter, it would overturn the entire book, and institutions resist upheaval. Their authority rests on consensus. To admit Atlantis is to admit ignorance. To admit ignorance is to surrender control. The Eritrea of Africa. History has long diminished Africa's role in civilization. Egypt is often framed as an anomaly, detached from its continent. Nubia, Mali, Aksum, all minimized or forgotten. To acknowledge Atlantis in Africa is to acknowledge Africa as cradle not only of humanity, but of empire. It elevates a continent long suppressed by colonial narratives, giving it primacy in the story of civilization. But for centuries, power has rested in Europe. Colonial scholars shaped history to reflect Europe's rise as destiny. Africa's past was painted as primitive, its people depicted as passive. If Atlantis is proven African, that illusion collapses. The eye becomes a monument to Africa's forgotten greatness, and a challenge to centuries of prejudice. The threat to religion and myth. Atlantis is not only history, it is myth. And myth competes with scripture. Religions across the world route their authority in creation stories, divine origins, and chosen peoples. If Atlantis is revealed as real, an empire erased not by gods, but by cataclysm, it rewrites divine narratives. It proves that civilizations predated scriptures, that gods may be memories of rulers or visitors, that mankind's past is deeper than doctrine. Such revelations threaten the foundations of faith. They destabilize traditions that govern billions. Thus, Atlantis is safer as allegory, a cautionary tale, than as truth. The economics of forgetting. History is also economy. Entire industries, tourism, museums, publishing, depend on the narrative as it stands. Egypt thrives on pyramids, Greece on ruins, Rome on its empire. If Atlantis is proven in Africa, power shifts. Tourists, scholars, and wealth would pour into Mauritania, into the Sahara. New monuments would eclipse old ones. The guardians of current heritage would lose primacy. Power follows narrative, and so narrative is protected, even at the cost of truth. Evidence ignored. Time and again, discoveries that challenge orthodoxy are dismissed. Stone circles in the Sahara are called primitive. Fossil rivers beneath sand are ignored. Artifacts near the eye are attributed to nomads, not cities. The Richat's perfect symmetry is labeled erosion, nothing more, and yet the pattern persists. Each anomaly fits Plato's account. Each dismissal deepens the suspicion. Not that evidence is lacking, but that recognition is denied. History is not only written by victors, it is edited by skeptics. Why Atlantis must remain a myth. To accept Atlantis is to accept that human civilization is older and more advanced than textbooks admit. That Africa may have been its cradle. That myths are not fantasies, but memories. That cataclysm, not progress, shapes history. Such truths would rewrite anthropology, archaeology, religion, economics, and power itself. The Eye of Africa would no longer be a curiosity, but a monument to humanity's forgotten greatness. And in that revelation, institutions would lose authority. Better then to dismiss it as myth. Better to mock, to deny, to suppress the silence in academia. Listen carefully, and you hear the silence. The Richat Structure, one of Earth's most striking formations, is rarely discussed in classrooms. Textbooks skim past it, museums ignore it. Only fringe researchers, explorers, and independent thinkers speak its name in connection to Atlantis. This silence is not accident, it is choice, for to discuss it is to risk legitimacy. To link it to Atlantis is to risk ridicule, and so scholars remain silent, and silence becomes suppression, the power of story. Yet myths endure, no matter the suppression. Plato's words survive. The tale of Atlantis has outlasted empires, religions, and regimes. Why? Because truth resonates, even buried beneath ridicule. It vibrates in human memory. We sense it, that something is missing, that history is incomplete, that a golden age was lost. The eye of Africa, gazing skyward, becomes a beacon for that intuition. No matter how history is written, the earth itself remembers. Its stones whisper, its rivers leave scars, its myths carry echoes. Atlantis survives not in textbooks, but in imagination. And imagination is where suppressed truths wait for rediscovery.